Hey guys, Metal Jesus here, and I have another Patreon question. This one comes from TJ Hall, and they ask, what's your favorite special edition of any console or handheld? So for this, I'm going to break this into kind of two parts because I'm going to really walk around some of the special editions that I currently have in my game room. But then at the end, I'm also going to talk about some of them that are still on the list that I would like to eventually pick up. The first one I want to talk about is this stunner right here. This is the Panasonic Q, and this comes courtesy of Cameron, who sent this to me a couple of years ago as a donation to my game room. And it's, as you can see here, it's absolutely beautiful. So this is a fully licensed version of the Nintendo GameCube, but it's created by Panasonic. And it's a really cool console because it's the full GameCube system, but then it also has a full DVD player built into this. It even comes with its own special versions of the GameCube controllers. An absolutely beautiful console. I often just look at this and marvel at how cool it looks. This particular one right here is, unfortunately, it doesn't work. That's the reason why they sent it to me, is because it has a problem where it has a hard time opening the drive and also reading discs. And that is a very common issue with these, although I supposedly can get it fixed. And so I definitely intend to do that at some point. But yeah, thank you very much, Cameron. I'm a big fan of the Game Boy Advance, and the SP was the first model that I ever got into with that handheld. And for a long time, I was looking for the SpongeBob SquarePants version of the Game Boy Advance SP. The reason for that is because this has the upgraded screen on it, the really bright, vivid screen on it. Plus, I just thought it was really cool that it's so silly that it's SpongeBob SquarePants. So I actually was really happy when I found this. I found it, a local Seattle game collector had one and sold it to me years ago. And this is definitely one of the highlights of my collection. I love it. As you guys know, I'm a huge fan of the PlayStation Vita. And while we didn't get a ton of console variations of the Vita in North America, we got a few, but over in Japan, the Vita was actually a huge success. And so there was a bunch of different versions of it over there. And when I went to Japan, I had to find as many of these as I possibly could. And this particular one, this is a kind of a burnt orange color, I guess is what you would call this, but I think it's absolutely beautiful. It's just so stunning looking. And the thing is, I'm not always a fan of orange itself. I think orange, just normal orange can be, I don't know, I just don't dig it. But this one is a darker satiny kind of shade of orange, and I just think it looks absolutely beautiful. And so I actually have a bunch of Vitas in my collection. It was kind of hard to choose which one I like the most because I also have a really cool red one, but man, this is awesome. A good friend of mine a couple years ago, Emilio, gave me as a present this really unusual yellow Sega Game Gear. This is one where every time when someone comes over to my game room here and they're walking around and looking at my collection and they see this, they're always really surprised because this, I believe, was only sold in Japan, maybe also in South America, but we didn't get it in North America. And Emilio found it at the Portland Retro Gaming Expo and bought it for me. And it's definitely a really cool one. I like its color, actually. I think it's a nice looking banana yellow Game Gear. Years ago, when I wanted my very first original Xbox, I walked into a GameStop and this was the version that they were selling new on the shelves on that day. And so I bought it that day and I've had it ever since, and I absolutely love its color. I like how it's a little bit see-through. You know, it's cool that it's Halo edition, and it's funny because it wasn't until years later that I picked up used off of Craigslist an original black one. So for me, the original Xbox has always kind of looked like this, at least in my game room. So it's definitely fond memories of this, and I still think it looks really cool. It's awesome looking. I'm also a really big fan of the Sony PSP, and there are a bunch of different versions of that. And I do have a lot of those, but the one I keep coming back to just because I think it's really elegant looking, and that is the white Sony PSP. And you would be like, well, there's nothing really that, amazing about that. It's kind of like a ceramic white. But what I like about this one is that on the back, you can see it's actually Darth Vader. So this is the Star Wars edition of the Sony PSP. Very cool version of it. This was actually a hand-me-down from my buddy Jerry, aka Barnacles. So thank you very much, Jerry. And then there are some that I'd like to add to the collection eventually. And the first one that came to mind is the amazing Star Wars edition of the Xbox 360. I think this looks absolutely killer. It still amazes me that this got made. And what's cool about this one is, well, for several reasons. One, all of the system sounds have been changed over to sound like Star Wars. So when you open the drawers and when you launch stuff, it actually makes Star Wars noises, which is very cool. But even cooler than that is that the official controller that goes along with it, as you can see in this footage here, is C-3PO like. So it looks to, it's kind of like made of the same stuff that C-3PO was. I imagine that being a huge fingerprint magnet, but I don't care. It's just so cool. I'm a big Star Wars nerd myself, so that's definitely on the list. Another one I'd like to eventually add to the collection, and I'm very envious because Kinsey actually owns it, I think in the box, and that is the Pikachu edition of the N64. Now, I'm not the biggest Pokemon fan. I know, but Nintendo did it right with this because I love how it's not just a decal printed on the top or something simple like that. No, they actually made a new mold and Pikachu is actually, sculpted and raised up. It just looks absolutely killer. I love the color combinations. It's just so striking. So I think Nintendo did a really great job with that. Another console variation I've been looking for lately, you see them right here. These are the colored PlayStation 3s. This is the last model that Sony made, and they did a bunch of different colors for these. You can see the white one here, as well as the red one, and I'm actually on the lookout for the blue one and some of the other colors that were in this style. And the reason why I started doing that is, one, I didn't have this particular model of PlayStation 3, but also, two, they're still being turned into GameStops here in North America. So in theory, you can find them, although I was able to very quickly find the white and the red one, but the blue one and some of the other colors are kind of tricky to get. So, but I want to do that before GameStop basically stops taking them in and selling PlayStation 3 stuff. So, that's my plan with this. So that's a quick look at some of the special editions that I have in my game room, and that's obviously not all of them. Those are just some of my favorites. But I would love to know down in the comments, what are some of your favorite variations and special editions of consoles and handhelds? I mean, again, I just barely scratched the surface here. There are literally hundreds, maybe thousands of them out there that were officially released by these console manufacturers. And I'd love to know what some of your favorites are and what you have in your game room. It'd be pretty cool. All right, guys, thank you very much for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Take care.